Hey, welcome back to another Bitcoin Reformation podcast. I'm Ben Haupt here with my friends Jared Townley and David Ruffner. Good to be with you guys. We have some new backgrounds that we typically don't have. So, David, what's going on with your welcome sign there in the background? That's very nice.
Yeah. Well, I've landed in East Peoria, Illinois, with my family last evening, and we just tonight, about 2 hours from now, the party will begin celebrating my in-laws, Mike and Kathy's 50th anniversary. A little ahead of time, about a month and a half ahead of time, but it's when we could get all the kids together from Chicago, California, being my crew, and then more locally here, and then invite 80 of our closest friends. So we're looking forward to that. But apart from that, I feel a little bit like, is it Johnny Cash? I've been everywhere, man. In the last few weeks, we had family vacation, which was absolutely great. 8 days, felt much more expansive. But several parts of the Sierras, and then last Thursday was in Napa very quickly with my wife for some meetings. Friday over to Carson City, Nevada. Saw an old classmate, Ben. Saw old Jed Mashke there. Saturday home. Sunday night, Ontario, California. Monday flew into California and then drove here. So we're both celebrating, and boy, did I sleep a righteous sleep last night. I was a tired guy. So that's what's happening here, but really all is well. How about you, Jared?
Yeah, David, that's a pretty crazy travel
It
schedule.
has been.
That would really put me on my butt too. Things around our house are pretty. We're past the summer vacation phase, if you will, and into kind of just riding, trying to enjoy the rest of summer as much as we can. So I'll give you one sort of kid story because that seems to be what I do here, and one other non-related thing. So we have here and where I live a local volunteer fire company puts on a parade every year where like fire companies from all over the area bring their fire trucks and we come watch them basically drive down the road and they throw candy at you. But they have a carnival afterwards where you can do rides and things like that. And so we went to the carnival with Zoe and Silas and got our tickets to ride our rides. And I'm not one to do heights. Like I've gotten a lot better, but I still just do not enjoy it. I have terrible memories of being in the top of the Washington Monument, swearing it was tilting and leaning and going to fall over, and that I was going to die. But nevertheless, all to say that I don't do Ferris wheels. I don't do roller coasters because they make me sick, and because they're tall. But Zoe wanted to go on the Ferris wheel, our little almost 3-year-old. And so I said, "Well, here you go, honey. You can go on the Ferris wheel with Zoe." And she told her, "Hey, mommy is a little bit nervous." And Zoe told my wife, "That's okay, mommy. You can hold my hand." Like just the cutest little
That's
caring,
fantastic.
loving little 3-year-old. It's amazing. It's amazing. So that those sort of moments continue to bring me joy and make me smile and laugh. Even in the midst of all the moments when I still think she's gonna kill her brother someday. But the other thing that's been really bringing me a lot of joy in my life, at least, is we're doing a series here where I preach, where I serve, on the parables of Jesus. And listener, I would posit to you that the parables of Jesus are some of the most practical words of all of the Bible. And I mean, I've read the Bible lots of times, read the parables a whole bunch, but just like having to actually preach them and share them in that way has been delightful. And I think people are really sort of resonating with it because it is like it's very clear in some ways and very challenging in some ways too. So every week I've told people, hey, the parables of Jesus, he's written them to challenge us, to convict us, and to change us. And it's been a joy to sort of hear people as they wrestle with them and be able to, wrestle them with myself too. So a real great, exciting and challenging and just kind of a fun thing for me in the work world here in Pennsylvania. So Ben, you're also got a different background there. What's going
Yeah,
on?
and maybe listening or viewer, you can hear a little bit of the craziness in the background, I'm at a Panera Bread Company because I am, ready for this? I am literally homeless. We moved all of our stuff out of our house into a storage unit, and we don't close on our new house for another 10 days. And so I'm literally a homeless guy sitting in Panera Bread Company coming to you on this
You know,
podcast.
Bitcoiners always joke about selling their couch and things, Ben. So did you just really sell your house and buy all Bitcoin and now you're going to be
Unfortunately,
homeless?
Jared, we did not. How I wished it would. Bitcoin moves very, very easily. Bitcoiners talk a lot about how easy it is to move Bitcoin around. Let me tell you, I should have just sold everything that I had and put it in Bitcoin. We probably would be way ahead. But instead, we hired a moving company, and we spent weeks prepping for this move. And my knees are still very, very sore from the move
Yeah.
just yesterday. So, but we're making progress, and so coming to you from a Panera Bread Company in Evansville, Indiana. Shout out to Panera, who didn't sponsor this video, but maybe we'll hit them up for a little cash down the road. I don't know if Panera takes Bitcoin yet. Maybe we can talk them into it. We'll see. We'll see. Well, we have a great show lined up for you today, and so I'll let you guys take it away.
Well, you promise a great show, Ben, and yet in a way, maybe my confession, maybe a silly confession, but this is one where I think, well, if I see correctly, is this truly episode number 8, guys? I can't believe it if that's true. That's amazing to me. But some of them we've planned really heavily, maybe too heavily, and I think classic. You're growing into something, and you overplan. Maybe even thinking of a pastor with a sermon or a Bible study. You're worried about filling all the stuff, so you bring all the stuff plus some, and you can't get to all of it. This one, we're dialing back, and if our listeners haven't caught on yet, we're somewhat roughly round robining the topics, kind of cycling through who's going to kind of frame the next one and take it, and it is my turn, hence I'm going first. In Bitcoin world, as with really maybe a lot of the world, there's this idea of meme culture, memes, memetics, short, quippy sayings that carry a lot, sometimes not even sayings or words. Sometimes that can be totally visual. But the Bitcoin world, particularly the Twitter or ex-Bitcoin world, has these in abundance. I think Ben or Jared, I forget which of you mentioned before, that Bitcoin has been described as number go up technology. Now, maybe not day to day or month to month, because you can find plenty of number go down, as in the dollar value of Bitcoin, up and down, sometimes down for a while. But if you look over its lifetime, now 15 years, it follows cycles because of that 4-year halving and the like, but it is slowly over time, certainly number go up technology. That's one of them. There are many more Bitcoin sayings, Bitcoin memes, quippy phrases that are purported to carry a lot. The one we're going to kind of play with today, maybe wrestle with, maybe that's the word, although I like it to some degree, is this. This is a Bitcoin meme, which is fix the money and you fix the world. Now, let's fix the money, fix the world. 6 words, right? Not a lot of words. Oh, but what a mighty claim for 6 little words. Fix the money, fix the world. And we're going to, I think, as we talk around these 6 words, just kind of try it on, and maybe unpack it, stretch it out, see what falls out of it, what our Bitcoin is trying to say by it, what has credence there, what's incredibly helpful, maybe what's less helpful. I think what we're maybe excited about this one, we talked about this behind the scenes weeks ago at the end of another podcast when we met privately and quickly kind of teed this up, was there's been any number of episodes so far where we are trying to speak to our Lutheran Christian friends, because we have them. We have family members, friends, neighbors, parishioners, colleagues and the like who we wish were as excited about Bitcoin as us. So we've been, in a sense, trying to describe Bitcoin for this type of hearer. But I think today we're going to go a bit theological as well and really come at this a little bit more full-throated as Lutheran pastors, Lutheran theologians, Lutheran husbands, fathers, brothers, this type of thing. But particularly from our Lutheran Christian mindset, how would we approach that claim, fix the money, fix the world? What's helpful? What's unhelpful? Would something else, could it be better said in another way? And having done that, I'll step back and kick it over to you guys to, what do you think?
I think it's helpful to sort of say too that we might be thinking we're addressing Bitcoiners too, but I think this is also where uniquely we can speak, right? That at the end of the day, as much as I've spent probably way too much time learning about Bitcoin, if I'm gonna put my hat on like an expert topic or a thing I know the most about, it's the gospel of Jesus Christ for the sake of the world, and especially through a Lutheran lens. So as I think about what unique thing we have to offer, this feels like hey, us three of us have the most to offer here in this way, even if it's not necessarily what we spent the most time on so far. Now feels like the appropriate time for us to engage in something that is more unique to who we are, what we do, and the abilities and skills that we have.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think what I would first do, because if it's true that at least right now, a lot of our initial listeners are our own friends, people that we went to seminary with, people that we go to church with, that the initial Christian response to fix the money, fix the world might be, that's absolutely ridiculous. Don't you know about sin? And I actually want to push back or kind of create some space for Christians and for theologians who are listening to this to say we actually do need to talk about this, that fix the money, fix the world isn't actually just something that should be disregarded out of hand because it's just simply not theological enough and it doesn't quickly enough solve the sin problem. I've talked on this podcast before about Hans Joachim Evant, and he was very interested in Christians being a part of not only the state. Christians are oftentimes very familiar with talking about church-state issues. He was also very interested in Christians talking about society and talking about how the ideas in society, like fix the money, fix the world, is actually something that Christians need to think about and wrestle with and not dismiss out of hand. So I actually think it's a really exciting question, and it's one that Christians should kind of tap the brakes a little bit and say, before we get to sin and problem of evil or something like that, let's talk about the economy. So I'm excited to dive into this, and that's why I said that I was excited for this show. So, David, back to you.
Excellent. Well, let's take it at least roughly in that order. And what would that order be? The order would be, first of all, let's just take the phrase at face value, and maybe for our listeners trying to stretch it out, see what falls out of it in terms of what are Bitcoiners when they do say this, fix the money, fix the world. What is it that they're trying to convey? What are the problems in the world as they see it? At least some of them, won't be an exhaustive list. But what are the problems in the world that they see that Bitcoin has the ability to address, whether incredibly directly or maybe even indirectly, but in a very connected fashion? What would some of those be?
I think we've talked a lot about some of these. So the easy one, I think, is the taking the money, the power of money out of the hands of the state, and we've talked about that in the sense of we can't make more dollars into our bank accounts, right? But that the government can make more dollars in our bank account. We've referenced that too when it comes to, especially to third world countries or countries that are not the United States, right, where the monetary supply, the monetary inflation is in the hundreds of percent, right? And so the sort of escaping that system, right? So the problem being a monetary or a government regime that's deflating or removing purchasing power over time. The solution being you get something that has a stable inflation rate, so to say, and preserves their purchasing power over time. I think that's probably one of the most primary ones people would say.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and to
fiscal
keep
one
on
immediately.
kind of riffing on, yeah, and to keep
Go ahead,
on
Ben.
kind of riffing on that a little bit, the problem of the state, we're not against the state. It's a gift of God by which God sometimes takes care of us, provides for us. And yet I do think that the problem of the state as such for Christians should be pretty real. I was featured recently on a blog by my friend John Inazu, who teaches at Washington University, and he featured this book on Evant, talking about Christians and their right to protest. And what was really interesting was, as Inazu read this essay on Evant, he talked about uh, Evant's writing on Hegel. So I get getting a lot of names here flying around, but Hegel had tried to point out that the state has a way of becoming almost like a god, and I think Hegel thought that that was a good thing. Uh, and Evant was very terribly concerned about that. And I think if you look around, if Christians look around, they might see that from a theological point of view, there are a lot of people that regard the state as a god, as an idol, as the one thing that can fix all of our problems. And so for somebody to challenge the sentiment, or for something like Bitcoin to challenge the sentiment that the state isn't God, is for Christians theologically really incredibly important. And I think it's something that Christians can stand up and say, the state should not be the be all end all, and it doesn't have this divine right or this divine opportunity to oversee everything, and to fix everything in our lives. So I think that's a fascinating one, of the problem of the state.
Yeah, or how about this? How about this? To back up what you're saying, when and where do you see government getting smaller? Is that the trajectory of your average government to get smaller? Answer for the most part, no. Actually, right now, and it's too much for this conversation, that does appear to be happening in Argentina all of a sudden. And it's a painful thing for government to get smaller. Um, Let me ask the next question. When and where do you see government maintaining its same size? And I probably just can't even answer that. Maybe we can't. Maybe your average hearer can't. But when and where do we see government getting larger? And that's where we say, yeah, probably most places where government is tended to go, day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, is probably where we get larger. I always think of this in a fallen world, back to the sin problem, but we try and fix so many things by addition, right? Our church body every 15, 20 years says to the churches, when you've gotten a new pastor, how well prepared have they been? And how could they have been better prepared? And those are fine questions, but when the solution is always and forever seemingly to be to add more classes, more modules, more preparation, we can add more, and still every 15, 20 years find out that there's lack. It takes time to get good at any vocation, any call, that we're fallen creatures, all of this. But in general, we try to fix broken systems typically by adding more. And governments are a prime example of this. So they get larger. And then just think of that. How large can a government get? And do governments even produce anything? They're not the producers. They actually are consumers by way of taxes, and then spenders. And now the temptation over and over again is to become overspenders, spend beyond their means, something we can do also, but can only get away with for so long. They can do for much longer, with the repercussions not really being for them, but for their people. So that's another way for me to think about government. Not bad, but what is the trajectory of governments over time? Oftentimes bigger, bigger, bigger. The great sucking sound.
I think another thing that people would say what this phrase means or what they're trying to fix is the different incentives around the way money works today. So, a few examples, right? That the way the world works today, if my purchasing power is not going to be worth as much in the future, if I have $100 today and in 10 years from now it's only going to be worth 50, I'm incentivized by that fact to spend and not save. And so the incentives, I think we could maybe all agree that that's not necessarily the most healthy thing, to always spend and to never save. That is something it's trying to solve. Another incentive that I think it seeks to change, that in today's day and age, there's a good Coinbase commercial. Maybe we should try and find that and link this here, that debt is good. You know, that we were told that, oh, well, there's this thing such as good debt, right? You know, you go to school and you get in hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt. That's good for you. You go and you take out a loan to buy a house, and that's good for you. You know, like this idea of spending more than we have right now, the idea that we have to take on debt to do life, is I think an incentive that the way that the world is currently function, or the way it's currently set up anyway, is Bitcoin trying to fix that. And we could talk maybe a little bit about how, but I think that is another thing Bitcoiners would say that Bitcoin is trying to fix, is the different ways the fiat, the United States dollar system is structured, is set up.
Well, let's start working these backwards. So I'll start with you, Jared, and then I'll go back to the government question with Ben. How does Bitcoin... Oh, we just lost Jared, maybe? Jared, are you there? Anyways, how...
I'm still here.
Great.
My
Jared,
video's just acting up.
Okay, so how would Bitcoin actually address that? If you fix the money and fix the world, and the implication or supposition there is actually, hey, Bitcoin's better and it will fix the world. It is a fixed money leading to a fixed world. How would Bitcoin change incentives, Jared?
So you're gonna have to deal with a black screen for me, but I'm here. I think the easiest way that they would say that would be it incentivizes. Let's take the saving one first. That if we assume that Bitcoin doesn't just preserve my purchasing power over time, but actually increases it, then I'm going to be incentivized to save more than to spend. And so a lot of times on Bitcoin X, Bitcoin Twitter, whatever you want to call it, people will share these images and these pictures of what an iPhone cost 4 years ago in Bitcoin. That an iPhone cost, this is probably not right, but let's say 10 Bitcoin 5 years ago. Well, today it costs maybe 0.002 Bitcoin to buy an iPhone. And if the assumption is made that if that's the case, then I want to defer all of my spending that I can, because by spending that Bitcoin now, I'm losing out on the future possibility to spend it at a greater purchasing power amount. And so it incentivizes me, it encourages me to save, because it's delayed gratification. I'm delaying my gratification now in order to enjoy it later. And so in that way, it does incentivize us to save for sort of a future date. So that's how I would answer that first part. I'd be curious. Maybe I'm not as well equipped to answer the second one as much as I think I could. But Ben, Dave, you want to add to that?
Ben sending it over to me. That's fine. No, I really liked that answer, Jared. I thought that was a great answer. You're right. The incentives and outcome. So was it Munger or Buffett who said that? Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. And if I'm incentivized to buy stuff now and not save because my savings will be leaky and not powerful enough to keep up with inflation, I'm gonna buy a lot of small stuff right now, maybe medium quality stuff, maybe really cheap stuff, that has to be replaced over and over again. And I truly am going to be disincentivized from saving up, from being patient. Bitcoiners often talked about this in terms of time horizons. Are you living for the moment, right? Or are you living with a view for not only today but tomorrow and the next day, and the people in your lives? I mean, I know at the same time culturally that a lot of people, it's seen as virtuous, the idea of living in the moment. I've often said if that's true, then there's nobody more virtuous in the Ruffner house than our dog Moki. She is like stuck in the moment, right? She can't think of the past that much. She doesn't plan for the future. She is the paragon of virtue in the Ruffner house, if living in the moment is wildly virtuous. But that's never been a full claim. I mean, enjoy the moment, be in the moment, serve those around you in the moment. All that is great. But and trust in the Lord's provision. Yes. Don't worry excessively about tomorrow, sure. But at the same time, we take stock of things. It might start like this: winter is coming. Now I'm sounding like Game of Thrones or something, but the seasons, we take stock of the seasons and we store up appropriately. I'm sure yesteryear we had to do that more so than now, right? We can can the vegetables now and buy canned vegetables, and we think maybe less of the seasons. But part of our Christian stewardship is paying attention to the seasons and tomorrow, and working today to save up to be able to provide for ourselves and others tomorrow. So it is a broken incentive system when if we were to set dollars aside right now, they just melt away compared to spending them right now. That is a broken incentive system, and I think you've given a great example, Jared. Just one example. Maybe iPhones aren't the paragon of stewardship and caring for our loved ones, but it's a good example where we have a vehicle here whereby when you do save with it, when you lengthen your time horizon, it not only preserves that spending power, but even increases it for others. So that's a good example of fix the money, fix the world, with the flip side being a broken money is a lousy life to live in, a lousy world to live in. And I think you've given a great example there. I'll kick it over to Ben, though, on the government side. How does the broken money, I mean, we pray for our governors, right? Which is to say for the government, those in government. We understand, we can see government as an extension of fatherly and motherly parental care, fourth commandment for us Lutherans, right? Good government, those public servants is also the name we used to ascribe to these people, that they were public servants and not kings and princes and the like. But right now, how does our broken money make this area of governance and governing a hard place, Ben?
Yeah, so I was thinking about it this way. So in the medieval ages, in the Middle Ages, there was this idea that there were three estates, and the three estates get talked about in a lot of different ways, but it's kind of like a three-legged stool, right? You can imagine sitting on a stool. It has three legs, not four. And the church in the Middle Ages, the church is definitely one, and the state is definitely one. And then sometimes people will say, well, the third is like family, or a little bit into the more modern era, they began to say, well, maybe it's church and state and society. Well, what Christians did was they kind of made the whole debate, starting in the 30s, 40s, with the rise of Hitler and the real problems of fascism and totalitarianism and communism and capitalism. Christians started to say, well, it's just church versus state, and all of a sudden your stool has only two legs on it, right? Which becomes really wobbly. And then you get people saying, well, we don't need the church anymore. I mean, what does the church have to do with this? So all of a sudden, you're putting all the weight of how the world works on one leg of the stool, on the state. So it's not surprising. We're in the political season right here in America. We're gearing up for the 2024 election that will be in November, and people are already starting to freak out. What happens if this? What happens if that? Is this the right person that's going to run or not? And there's this enormous amount of anxiety in the environment, maybe because we're trying to have all of American society basically sit on one leg of the stool. Fix the government, fix the world, maybe would be the way that some people think. And I
Hmm.
think if you begin to start putting some legs back under the stool and say, let's actually not put the money in the hands of the government. Maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe that experiment that they had in kind of modern times. Let's let the state determine how much money gets issued, and we'll leave it all up to the government appointing people to the Federal Reserve and all this stuff. Maybe that's actually a really bad idea, because you're putting all your eggs in one basket, and then it comes down to who's the president and who controls Congress. So a couple of votes determines like everything that controls society. What if we started to say, no, actually, it's really good for us to have a couple of legs on our stool, not just the state, the government. What if monetary system was its own thing, was separate from the government? That provides a little bit more stability. Hey, maybe the church and maybe these goofy theologians actually have something to say, and we should start listening to them again, because tradition has it that the church was actually pretty important for the stability of society and for people's lives. So you start propping these legs back up under the stool. So I think what Bitcoin does is it says, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, frankly, we don't care. We don't need you. We don't Bitcoin does not know who Joe Biden and Donald Trump are. And Bitcoin doesn't need to know who Donald Trump and Joe Biden are. There's no way that they can control Bitcoin. And that's really, really helpful. And so in some ways I think Bitcoin can say, we'll fix the money system. And in that way, we add a leg to the stool, and we provide a little more stability to the society that we live in. And for me, that's actually comforting, because I know that my financial welfare and how the economy is going in our society doesn't just depend on my vote in November.
That
Even more than that, like it takes the hands. If we started with you giving people the permission to talk about things other than sin, but this is where I think you got to circle back to that, right? Because this takes the power of money and how it works and who gets this, and it really removes all of that from what? From sinful people, right? From people who, sure, we want them to be good public servants. We, hopefully elect them thinking that they're going to serve in the interest of their people that they represent. But ultimately, as a Christian, we know that they are sinful, broken people just like you and me. And so, with something as powerful as money, which money is very powerful, right? You got the money, you can be in power, you can control a lot of stuff. And so if we take that power away from them, it just like I love the word comfort, like that there is a certain amount of I wouldn't go so far as to maybe say peace, but there's a certain amount of, hey, I can know what this is going to be how it's going to work, and I don't have to be concerned about this thing happening to it or that thing happening to it, because there's not a sinful person necessarily involved in it. And so in some ways we're free to worry about different, and I would even say better things, right? That the incentive, here talk about incentives again, the incentive even goes so far as to say, hey, you don't have to worry about money as much in the same way, because it's not being controlled by someone else. It's not being whatever we want to talk about, inflation. It's not, all these sort of things. The stool is there. I like that language too. The stool is there and it's stable, and that's what it is. And we would say that that's something that only Bitcoin could do, at least in today's day and age, that's the only piece of technology we have that can offer that amount of stability in the financial world. And so really fix that money, and then maybe the phrase is be able to fix other things as well.
I really like that, Jared, this idea that Bitcoin and the code that Bitcoin is written in keeps sinful people out from fiddling with it all the time. And I suppose Christians or theologians might push back. Christians are theologians, by the way. All Christians are theologians. That sounds like a quote from, I don't know, Ratatouille or something like that, right? All Christians can cook food. All Christians can be theologians. No, all Christians are theologians. But here's the thing: some Christians, some theologians might point back or might push back, Jared, and say, I don't know. I mean, does Bitcoin really remove humanity completely, and sinful humanity completely, from the process of money? And in some ways, I would say no, right? Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever that was, some human being created Bitcoin, and certainly we do not think that Satoshi Nakamoto was a sinless person. But here's the analogy. I think the American government system, or frankly any government system, is better than absolutely no government system whatsoever, right? So we have a constitution in America. Is it perfect? No. But it has all these checks and balances on people because it recognizes that human beings are sinful. And so rather than just having this be willy-nilly, or frankly, when you think about the federal bank and central banks and such, I mean, there's a very small number of people who control how everything goes, and it's not an open system. It's a very closed system. We don't know why they make the decisions that they make. They give us some basis, but Bitcoin essentially provides a constitution of a system that people can kind of open up. It's open source. Go and look. It's not a huge mystery how Bitcoin works. It's all out for everybody to see. So it's this very transparent. Anybody can go read the Constitution of Bitcoin, right? Go read the white paper, go study the code, and you can see how it works. And so in that way, Jared, I think you're absolutely right that it does remove some of the sinfulness of humanity that is just wants to constantly fiddle with it, to do things, to create things from fiat. That's why we use the word fiat, right?
Yep.
It's that it's all about creating something. That's what the Latin word fiat means, is to make something, to do something, to fiddle with it. So yeah, I think Jared, your claim stands up really well, actually.
And Ben, I'm going to think that what you just shared was maybe provocative for some people to hear, which is to say this: what do you mean, money not instituted by government? Is that even possible? Most of us have lived in a world where that's essentially only been the case. Is this fiat money. And yet we can remember in our U.S. history lessons and world history lessons as well, where there was a time when paper money was actually backed by something that was real. The gold standard primarily comes to mind. And now here's my confession. In high school, man, I tuned out of that stuff. I tuned out. I think it was Mr. Fleege's class, Ben. We went to high school together. Does that sound right? Anyways, I wish I had listened better. Now I happen to love history. You know, I've been on a 5-6 year dive into the history of money, the present state of money, the future of money. This is all true. But this was very challenging to me the first time I heard it. What do you mean? What other options do we have? Well, it turns out that for vast swaths of human history, money was not political or fiat the way you just defined it to be for a lot of people. This is really very new in human history, or much newer. It's not normative. How about that for human history? Here's something also true when it comes to fiat money, money that's not actually backed by something. The average lifespan for fiat money is something like 27 years. A study showed. Looked at the history of fiat monies. They are short-lived. They come and go as vapors, and we're on year like 50, 51, 52, 53 of fiat money here in the U.S., and things aren't going well. We've been holding it together pretty well, but I don't know if you've noticed, listener, things aren't going well. So this idea that there's realities outside of government. It turns out that for a long time in American life, we recognized several things as being preceding the nation. Sometimes the language used for those things are pre-political entities. Marriage, for instance, was very much a pre-political entity. Yes, laws were put into place to recognize this pre-political entity, even protect it, foster its further establishment and use and health. All those types of laws were put into place, but it was only in the last 10 years that now even marriage is by fiat, you could say. It's denied now, at least in our official law or some of the Supreme Court rulings, that marriage was pre-political. Rather, it's seen as just the whim and will and powerful will of man. It's been named as such, and it can only be named as such as long as it doesn't kind of do violence to any particular subgroup, right? And therefore it's been opened up and changed and the like. But for the longest time, we recognized pre-political entities outside of the ability for Congress to vote on them. And that's, I think, what you're describing here is a money that's outside of the control of the U.S. Sounds scary initially until you start thinking about it more. What has it meant for it to be inside the control of the United States or any particular government? It's meant that there's been temptation from the beginning to toy around with it, and men and women have fallen into temptation to do so. And once we've done that once, now we're going back to it over and over again as if this is normal and regular and good, and it's not, nor is it necessary. So imagine instead a nation, a culture. They still have people with jobs and paychecks, but when it comes to the money, that's part of their monetary policy. Nobody has the credentials to mess with that monetary policy. You can work against it, I suppose. You can work with it, go with the flow, but no one has the ability to change it, to alter it, to manipulate it. And if you stop and begin to think of the repercussions of that, you might say that would be actually a really good day. That would be a good day for me. It would be an equally good day, actually, for my neighbors, my loved ones, as well as my enemies. Because removed then from all of us is this particular temptation to, again, manipulate, distort, change that fiscal policy in a way that's good for me, or monetary policy, good for me, but bad for somebody else. And so would that make the world a perfect place? Answer, no. Would it remove a particular pernicious temptation that's fallen into over and over again? Answer, yes. And that would be a good thing. And maybe this is the time to begin introducing this idea. Would the world thereby be fixed? Fix the money, fix the world? Answer, no. So actually, I'll go ahead and give my punchline now to this meme, fix the money, fix the world. I say that's a claim that Bitcoin can't even live up to. However, if I could tweak it a little bit, it's not nearly as catchy. I would say a better money for a better world. I'm on board. I'm on board. Let's talk. I want to talk about it. I want to hear about it. I want to study it, and I want to be a part of it if it's a real thing.
And I feel like this is you were talking last time when we were just kind of chatting about the sort of different ways to think about this, the sort of two kinds of righteousness.
Yeah, I think this is probably the place where we need to talk about that fix the world part, and what exactly do Bitcoiners mean when they say fix the money, fix the world. So I think what Bitcoiners have in mind are the kinds of what theologians would call the horizontal plane, or to use some really fancy, theologians love to use Latin as much as Bitcoiners do, right? Fiat. We're going to introduce a Latin phrase here, coram mundo. Cora is to be standing in the face of, or in the presence of, or before. Like you have an audience and you're standing in front of a group. Who's the group? Well, for theologians, in one respect, coram mundo is to be before the world. Mundo. So when Bitcoiners are talking about fix the money, fix the world, I think what they mean is fix the worldly kind of stuff, like society. Maybe society would work a little bit better. Maybe government would work a little bit better. Maybe our individual lives and how we encounter things like value of our work and the value that we've saved and the value that we contribute to other things, that those kinds of things can be fixed by Bitcoin. So in one respect, fix the money, fix the world, coram mundo, when we're just talking on the horizontal plane among human beings, in a lot of ways that's very true. And I think Christians can and should, like I was saying in the beginning, Christians should affirm that there's a lot to this human society that we live in. And so coram mundo, fix the money, fix the world. I think we can say with Bitcoiners that's exactly right. And yet, Bitcoiners would be a little bit out of their league with that phrase if they also meant that by fix the money, fix the world, they were thinking of what Christians think of as the vertical dimension. The vertical dimension is our relationship with God. This is classically in Latin put as coram Deo, standing not here I am in Panera. So in Panera Bread Company, right, I am, it's very obvious to me that I am before the world. And yet Christians would say that we can never leave the presence of God. And very quickly I go from realizing, oh, there's people sitting around me probably looking at me weird because I keep talking about Bitcoin on this podcast, to realizing, oh, here I sit right in this Panera Bread Company. I'm in the presence of God as well. There's no place, Psalm 139 classically states this, that there's no place that we can go where we're not in the presence of God, right? Even if I make my bed in the depths of hell, there you will still find me. So coram Deo, in the face of God, in the presence of God. How does fix the money, fix the world stand up? Well, I'm gonna kind of step back and let you guys kind of fill in some of the blanks there. But my provocative suggestion is that fix the money, fix the world. When we're all of a sudden realizing we're in the presence of God, maybe that little phrase starts to wither a bit.
I feel like this is the sort of thing a lot of people need to hear, because I think Sam said it well last week. It's good to be with some Bitcoin truthers or something like that. And like this idea that I think sometimes we could be easily perceived as culty, as like you seem to really like this in a very like deep and like, is this idolatry? Like, you really like this somewhat too much in my perception. And so I think this is a helpful distinction for people to hear. We've said it. We've talked about how, you know, the gospel of Jesus is better. You know, that Bitcoin is not God, etc. But this distinction, I think, makes that the most clear. And so, just like Ben said, like in the world, as my money relates to my person who lives next to me and my neighbor across the country, that there are a lot of problems that Bitcoin can fix, right? But when we think about our relationship with God, whether you have one or not, everyone does, whether they want to admit it or not, that there is only one way for us to be in good relationship. There's only one way to fix the problem of that sin, right? All have fallen short of the glory of God. All have sinned. And that's the death, resurrection of Jesus Christ and faith in that. And ultimately, this is when it kind of becomes clear that, well, Bitcoin cannot believe for me. Bitcoin cannot satisfy my sin. Bitcoin cannot give to me eternal life. It's not going to raise me from the dead. Suddenly, these sort of, oh, yeah, there's only one thing, one person who can do that. And it's not Satoshi. It's not anyone that has anything to do with Bitcoin. But it's Jesus and Jesus Christ alone. And to me, I would hope, too, that listeners, you hear that, viewer, too, that, oh, that's where this is clear. That's where it becomes obvious, this sort of distinction and difference between, well, you seem so into this. Why are you into this so much? Well, because this, we think, is really important. But in this way before God, we're very clear on this is, in some ways, as good as it is here, it's still a fallen thing, right? It still is just part of this world that is passing away, right? That Jesus will come back and make a better one when he returns to. So, David, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, there's these areas of discongruence and congruence that where it's discongruent, where there is a vertical problem between God and man. We've got nothing to offer. Satoshi Nakamoto's got nothing to offer. No one can invent something new. We often try foolishly to do that because there's space. There's space between us and God, right? On account of what we've done. And it occurs to me that part of the congruence, though, is why is there space between us and God? Is because he spoke by his word initially. And instead of staking our lives on his word from the outside in, we said, no, I've got something to offer by my own power, right? And we tried to go on our own words in our own way. Genesis 3 is where we find the beginning of that story, our rebellion. Oftentimes it's labeled as the fall. I actually prefer to see it as a rebellion, as a rising up against, as a leaving that which is good for that which we can produce with our own hands, hearts, minds, words. And the answer is we can't produce much before God. We just create the problem and then perpetuate the problem, share it with all of our children and them with theirs also. So there's this fiat problem. We tried rising up in our own power. And then I think all the way to the New Testament, Romans 3, at just the right time, while we were powerless, while we were rebellion, it even says while we were still enemies of God, Christ died for us. So it's pretty amazing that we introduced the rebellion, the problem. We departed from his word. And yet what does God do? He comes our way, puts his life on the line, and does something about it. Pays the record of our sins, destroys death, rises from the dead. I always think of Resurrection Day as being, it's like the setup for all kinds of horror movies, right? And that line in the horror movies, he's back, he's back and he's going to have vengeance now. You better watch out. Christ is back. You killed him by your sin. He bore the weight of your sin. He died, and he's back. This should be a day of fear for us, just as it was for in the Old Testament, the closing chapters of Genesis, for the brothers of Joseph, for they thought they had killed him, and now he's alive, and they cannot envision him coming in any other way other than vengeance. But here comes Christ with peace. So the fiat problem is in both realms, right? That we tried going the way of our own power, just establishing ourselves, projecting our own power. And it doesn't go well in either realm when we do that. In the vertical realm, God has done all for us in Christ. He has freed us now that we're not either delusionally thinking we're knocking it out of the park with God and he's going to give us a trophy, or being at the other end of things, despairing of how poorly we're doing. Now that we're free from both and see that God has covered that debt of sin through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we're actually now free to go back into that horizontal world around us. We're also, fiat has been a problem, and we're free to do hard work for our loved ones and our neighbors. Enjoy when somebody else lavishes us with their hard work, which is hospitality, rest, right? And where there's hospitality, there's, I guarantee there's rest for somebody, right? And when we live in the accomplished work of other people, there's rest and joy. So we're able to both share that with others and receive it in that horizontal world, and actually try to tackle real world issues. We won't get it perfectly done, but as we've said before, we can acknowledge when our tools are faulty, maybe even pernicious, right? And we can at times lay those aside for better tools, where we can find those. And I think that's where I'd come back to it. And I really like the idea. Maybe even Ben and Jared, you've warmed me up to the idea of fix the money, fix the world in a horizontal fashion. I think I'm still, probably due to piety, whether false or good, I'm kind of more prone to thinking like better money for a better world. As I told these guys last week that, I think I told you, maybe not, but I've had trouble in every workplace I've ever worked in, right? I've had trouble in every neighborhood I've ever lived in. It just turns out I'm the only common denominator to all those places, right? It's me, I'm my own worst enemy most days of the week. And so I like the idea of better money for a better world, right? Moving the needle incrementally, even when it is profoundly, nevertheless incrementally, because the biggest problems in the world will still persist. That sinful people like me still hang out with sinful people like you, right? And that we bump into each other in time. Sometimes we have bad intents. Sometimes our good intents go sideways. We'll still deal with that, even if the money's fixed. However, oh, what a great thing it would be if this money that is in the world were fixed. Because what part of our lives, horizontal lives again, does it not touch? It touches so much, more than I ever contemplated until this Bitcoin conversation entered my life, and it.
Well, Jared and David, I think you guys both nailed this idea that Bitcoin doesn't fix every single problem that the human being will ever encounter, right? Like the problem of sin, the problem of evil, and that Jesus Christ alone has fixed those problems and continues by his gracious ruling in our world to fix those problems in our lives today. So, yes, I think very much what we can say, coram Deo, that Bitcoin fix the money, fix the world. It doesn't fix the sin problem, the evil problem in the world. And yet, I'm gonna redeem the phrase even a little bit more, or at least try to. So try this on. I think that fix the money, fix the world points to something, especially because of what Jared was talking about earlier, how Jared and I had this kind of back and forth about Bitcoin and its code keeps humans and sinful people out of the way because there is this code. It's almost like a constitution, right? So I'm going to use that to point to some truth in Christianity, but let me pause there for a second and tell the Christian story using the lens of C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the main character Aslan, who is an allegory for Jesus Christ, eventually there's a problem. The kids get into a problem. Edmund has made a mistake, sin, and it needs to be paid for, right? And there's this code that's baked into reality that the White Witch, who is an allegory for Satan, points at and says, no, Edmund has to pay for his mistake, right? And that code that is kind of hard baked into reality, the White Witch can hate it, but the White Witch can't deny it. The White Witch actually uses it to say Edmund must pay, and Aslan steps in and says, "No, I'll pay for Edmund's mistake, Edmund's sin, because the code is in-baked, and I'm not going to deny the code." So Aslan takes on the punishment for himself, right? He dies. The code, the law, the tablet, actually breaks. Christians, theologians call this code that I've been talking about the law, right? And I think that Bitcoin kind of points us to something again that we've lost sight of. And it's for governments today who have this power to, hey, we have a bunch of debt. We could just print more dollars and create more currency, more dollars so that we can pay our bills. It devalues the coin of the realm, but we can kind of do that. It's up to us. Bitcoin kind of reasserts the law. Bitcoin reasserts this code that's kind of baked in and points to something that I think is really profound, that the law captures and that the law reminds us of. There are laws of unintended consequences, right? There are Moore's laws, and there are all these laws in the universe, and there are these realities that, the law of gravity. I could try to escape gravity, but I would really have to work hard to escape that law. Bitcoin's fix the money, fix the world kind of points to this fact that there are laws, and you can try to print more money and get out from under that law, that if you have debt, you will eventually have to pay for it, which the White Witch maintained. Bitcoin essentially reminds humanity that no, there are real laws. And as much as we don't like them, as much as we think in the modern world that we have created these systems that will almost challenge these laws, right? We've created space rockets to go up into outer space, and so for a brief amount of time, we have escaped gravity. Humanity has, or at least that's the case if you believe that humans actually landed on the moon. I do too. I'm not that crazy, but I think fix the money, fix the world points to these actual laws and how they govern humanity. And in that way, fix the money, fix the world points to it doesn't evangelize us, but at least points to there are real laws. And when we abide by the laws, or at least are aware that these laws exist and we take them seriously, we're better off. Is that a stretch? What do you think?
Do I hear you right in are you saying that if Bitcoin is pointing that there are real laws, are you almost making the jump that this is sort of the creator language, right? That there is a creator who has made. I mean, are you going that far too?
Well, I mean, I think it certainly points that way. We would some apologists who have tried to explain the faith would, C.S. Lewis even would talk about how this was kind of preparatory evangelism. It doesn't actually state the truth of the gospel that Jesus Christ came and paid for our sins, but it does kind of begin to point to some things that are real, like Bitcoin points to, obviously somebody created the Bitcoin protocol. In that way, Bitcoin also asserts that, yeah, like you're saying, Jared, there is a creator, and maybe there are these baked in laws, these codes to reality, and maybe modernism is wrong. Maybe we can't escape every single one of those laws and live however we want to live. And that's a terrifying reality, right? It's a very scary thing, because modernism tries to assert in every respect that the autonomous adult human being can make his or her own laws. And Bitcoin is kind of saying, no, you can't.
I'm super sympathetic to that way of thinking. I'm drawn to it. In fact, I find it in a lot of the authors I read, Ben, and I don't know in many cases whether they're Christian or not, but I am drawn to authors who acknowledge that there is a world around us, and we need to learn how to work with it and its rhythms and not against it, But of course, when it comes to so much in life, whether fiscal and monetary policy or the human body, think of a lot of the movements of the last 15, 20, 30, 40 years has been to suggest, no, make of it what you will. It's all just putty, right? There is no received world. There's only the world as you make it. And boy, you read literature, and that's a dystopia almost universally in literature, right? Whether we're talking sci-fi, where we're trying out ideas in some sort of far off or futuristic landscape, so as to actually be wrestling with these very realities in our own landscape, whether it's that, or I can think of a novelist but an essayist, Wendell Berry, who we're going to have an episode on him sometime as well. I can think of Athy, this farmer in Jayber Crow, this fictional autobiography of a town barber. I mean, how crazy is that as an idea? I'm thinking he had a good relationship with his publicist before he said, "Hey, I've got an idea for a new one, a fictional biography of a small town barber."
It's absolutely my favorite book of all time. Jayber Crow is my
too, man.
Book of all time I've read.
Fantastic! I did not realize that about you. I've written about Jayber Crow. Well, I love it because he's trying to hand the farm off to his son-in-law, okay? And I will forget the line, but the son-in-law sees the land as that which by he might possibly enlarge himself and his standing before others, as opposed to a partner in life that he can work with in its rhythms and alongside, and they will both serve and care for each other, the land and the animals and the like. So Athy, I would say this, Wendell Berry does not say this exactly in that moment, but would say there's a created world, and you must not live on it by fiat. We keep coming back to that word, by the sheer projection of your own power, the sheer insistence of your own importance, right? And so I'm really drawn to authors like this, stories like this, and maybe that's part of what draws me as well to Bitcoin. Maybe I'm naturally, personally inclined to do it in a way that maybe not everybody is. But again, this idea of something that's pre-political, it's not boy, it's not just sheer political beast. And the projection of men, 51% of them at least, and their will over the 49%. It's this thing that stands out there. I can participate in it or not. The U.S. could participate in it and not, but it's not captured by the U.S. government or any one person. Insofar when people do participate in it, they're all on the same footing. This is just, it's very interesting, maybe mysterious for those very same reasons to some people, disconcerting, new, odd, maybe all those things also. But I really resonate with what you're saying there, Ben, in terms of it's something where you have to pay attention to it, pay attention to the creation that it is, and then say, either acknowledge it as something good that you want to kind of live alongside with, where you tend it and it tends to you, sort of in the same way that land might in Wendell Berry's soil might in Wendell Berry's imagination. I really see it, I suppose, as such. And that's doesn't
this feels
exactly
like a good place
bring
to
in
stop.
Okay, very good, yeah.
But can I want to circle back to the two sort of things, right? So fix the money, fix the world, right? So we talked a little bit about the fixing the money part, and talked a little bit about fix the world and how a Christian might be able to say that that's okay, but yet how it doesn't fix our relationship with God. But I want to maybe add a little bit of, this might sound ludicrous, but I think it does help us live as followers of Jesus. So it might not fix my relationship with God, but it does help me follow Jesus. Here's what I mean. So if we go back to incentive stuff again, what incentives is this going to be for me as a follower of Jesus, right? Well, we think about scriptures that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. We think about Jesus not being so focused on storing up treasures on earth, but treasures in heaven, right? That there is very clear teaching about greed, about acquiring more than we need, all those sort of things in the Bible. And so if there's something like Bitcoin that is going to, like we talked about, increasing my purchasing power over time so that then I'm incentivized to save more, I don't have to run the rat race, right? I don't have to be the one who is so focused on getting a second job, getting that promotion, making sure that I'm making the most so that I can have all of these nice things, so that I can get that bank account or keep up with whatever number I need to have, because there's a better money that exists, so that I don't have to worry about those sort of things. That I can truly be content with what I have, because I'm not worried about the fact that, well, when I'm 50, I'm going to be dirt poor because I'm not making a bunch of money. I'm not poor, but I'm not a CEO of some company. I'm not in a tech field, that I can actually then follow Jesus and not be so concerned about that. That's one way. Think about if churches adopt this thing too, right? Some churches have endowments, some churches have savings. Ministry is expensive. It's people, it's, benefits, it's programs, things like that. But imagine a world where churches can actually, their ability to purchase things increases over time too. And now suddenly it's not just about having an endowment that has millions and millions of United States dollars in, so that then if, there's no one there, at least the doors can be open. But think about the fact that more ministry could happen too, right? That like the church could actually be doing more things in the world because the money they use is actually increasing in purchasing power over time. Think of all the different ways we could serve our neighbor, right? In those ways, meet people's needs in that way, kind of become the, Ben, you talked about church in the medieval age, that sort of social center where people go to for what they need and not having to rely on the government for that sort of stuff. So like this really, I think, plays itself out in so many different ways that it doesn't necessarily, again, fix the relationship with Jesus, but in a really weird, strange way, it kind of does help us follow Jesus, of course, disregarding the only way we get closer to Jesus by the word, through the sacraments, right, that he's given to us. But nevertheless, it helps me live as a follower of Jesus by maybe removing, just like we've talked about too, some of those temptations to sin, to things that would sort of weigh me down as I live my day-to-day life, as I follow after him.
Jared, I love that, and here's why. Uh, this idea that what if churches adopted Bitcoin? That idea in and of itself is really a fundamentally different kind of church. And here's what I mean. I've been thinking for a while about the relationship between denominations that we have today, like the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod or United Methodist or the Anglican Church, and their relationship to the nation state. I actually think this is a humongous problem because the nation state was born out of modernism, rationalism, and I have lots and lots of problems the older I get with modernism, rationalism, and even the idea of nation states. Denominations like the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, what are our reserves in? US dollars, of course, right? So there was a theologian, Werner Ehlert, he had this idea that it's good when a church body is tied to a nation state or to a people. Werner Ehlert was himself a Nazi, a Lutheran who wanted to tie a true Lutheran church to the state. We know on this side of history how that worked out, right? Not a very good idea. It's really important for Christians to stand up and say, we pray for you, our rulers. We pray for Joe Biden. We prayed for Donald Trump when they were our presidents, but they are not the supreme God. And I don't want a church that's linked to the nation state, right? That only would hold the reserves of the nation state in its coffers and would essentially tie its boundaries as a denomination, right? Think of the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church is the Anglican Church because it's in England. It's part of their name. Anglican is very much tied to England. I don't want to live in a church that says the boundary of our church is the boundary of our nation state. That's a terrible idea. It's actually against the gospel. It's against our view of the church. There's one church across the world. It knows no boundaries, right? It knows no borders. And that is the same with Bitcoin. It is one money for all of humanity. And it's not trying to proclaim that it'll just be easy if we're all live in a globalized world. I think there are problems with globalism, but there are significant problems with the idea of the nation state. And I would love to envision a church body and a way of being church that wasn't so tied to the nation state. Now I'm really off on a limb, and maybe you guys see me like sawing the limb off. If people are listening to us, maybe they think I've gone bonkers, but yeah, I'll have to think and talk a little bit more about that.
I didn't know where you were going at first. I didn't know where you were going at first, Ben, but I appreciated it more and more the further you went there. Yeah, what institutions might the church be tied to that, again, we just don't see because we grew up with it as it is, and accepted it as just having forever and always been this way. And yet maybe it's not. And maybe it's not helpful. Maybe it's uniquely problematic. How might disassociating there change things for sure? Well, I'll begin then the wrapping.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I'll begin wrapping it up. Fix the money, fix the world probably bites off more than it can chew and swallow and digest, probably. But all day long, I think we're all problem solvers, right? In our own homes, we're problem solvers. In our workplace, with our kids. Your daughter, Jared, was a problem solver. Mom, just hold my hand, right? We're all problem solvers. Um, and there are unique and deep issues with current U.S. fiscal and monetary policy. We're probably more eager, the three of us, to talk about those deep issues and flaws, more eager than some, but we're all feeling it right now. Um, I do think the three of us would say this. It was true of the three of us. Bitcoin is what sent us to read more about these things, understand more about them, put them in their place, understand how connected money is to so many things. I mean, we didn't talk about quote unquote all the problems. Here's some problems coming up more quickly for Ben's kids and my own, is that they're finishing out kind of grade school and high school careers. I have two in college this next year. There was time I was fretting, how will we pay for them to go to college? Now I'm sweating and fretting the next bigger thing. Once they get out and they're productive members of society, how will they afford to live anywhere? Like where, how, where, how, this type of thing. So I see that. I've heard a new phrase being tossed around concerning these very young people, and it's Fiat nihilism. In other words, there's a nihilistic tendency among many of our young people, whether they know that word by name or not. It's there. It has many symptoms. I guess we could talk about it another time, but it's Fiat nihilism. So I see a world that is certainly broken in many ways. Nothing new there, but right now, so much of it is tied to our bad fiscal and monetary policy. Oh, that there were a better tool out there. And that's where the three of us are having so much fun. Seeing a better tool, seeing how it's connected to so many things, seeing its limits, seeing where the gospel of Jesus Christ is ultimately unique, is ultimately the thing that the world is dying for. Without it, the world is dying and dead, us too, and yet God has come in Christ to us. So that's the good, great news, Jesus Christ. We'd love to talk with you more about it. At the same time, horizontally, before man, we think there's also something good that's come about right now in this moment. We're very eager ourselves, as our listeners might know, to pursue it. We're hoping something about these sorts of conversations is giving that very same eagerness, hunger, thirst to some of our listeners as well, and that to that hunger and thirst, we're maybe providing some good helps along the way to maybe get you along on your journey to investigate Bitcoin also. I don't know. What else can you add to that, guys? What else do we have?
I think that was a
That's
fantastic show.
Good.
Jared, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, we're just three pastors who love Jesus, and we like to talk about Bitcoin too. We're happy you're here with us.
I think this show very much held up to the hopes that I had for it. We'll let our viewers, our listeners, respond in the comments and let us know what you think. Were we out to lunch? Were we off on a very, very shaky limb and we were sawing away to spite the world? Or are we onto something? We want this to be a conversation, and we'd love to be in touch with our listeners. So hit us up with a comment on social media, wherever you're listening to this. If you're listening on a podcast, find us on X, Twitter, or on Facebook, and let us know what you're thinking. And we'd love to be in touch. David, way to go, man. Great episode.
All right. Thank you, guys.